Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the Paranormal Paradigm podcast. Sorry there's been a bit of a delay between the last episode and this one, longer than usual anyway. But I'm sure you're all aware there's a bit of a worldwide issue at the forefront of everybody's minds, everybody's lives. Hope you're all keeping safe and I hope that you're all well. Not going to dwell too much on that issue really, because I know that it's going to be going on for some time, I think, and you can't seem to turn the TV on or you can't, get social media open without coming across this. It's playing a huge part in our lives and it is rather depressing, to be honest. So I'm hoping that you're going to be listening to this to just try and escape from that and to, relax a little and take your mind off what's going on elsewhere. So we're not going to dwell on that issue too much at all. Today's guest is Dave Hodrien. Now we're going to be stepping away from the paranormal again, or from the ghosts and the spirit side of things, and back over into UFOs. Now Dave Hodrien is the chairman and lead investigator for Birmingham UFO Group, or BUFOG for short, one of the most active groups dedicated to the subject in the UK. He has personally investigated hundreds of UFO sightings and over 300 contact cases from around the world. He has spoken at numerous conferences and appeared on television and radio on many occasions. He writes regularly for UFO Truth magazine and has previously written for Paranormal magazine and UFO Matrix. Dave feels that the evidence he has seen over the years points towards interaction between numerous intelligent extraterrestrial species and the human race. Now, BUFOG, Birmingham UFO Group, is my local group. And that's where I met Dave, because I used to go and, watch lectures and watch people give presentations on the subject. That's where I gave my first lecture. I'm sure you've probably heard me mention on a previous show. And Dave is the guy that I'm working closely with to bring that conference that I've spoke about many times on previous shows, bring that to fruition. The Truth Seeker Conference, UFO and Paranormal Conference. We're hoping it's going to still go ahead next April, assuming the current events have finally subsided by then. But before we get into today's interview with Dave, I just wanted to bring up some interesting photos that Jim Smith, a fellow listener, posted on our Facebook group last night. You can see these photos if you head over to Paranormal Paradigm page on Facebook. Ask to join the group. I'll let you in because I'm nice like that. And you can see these photos. And they're very interesting. I asked for Jim to send some to me. And he did, so I could analyse them. I messed with some of the contrast, the saturation, some of the colour, and managed to, just show in a bit more detail what it was we thought he'd caught. And there's definitely a figure there. Now, a bit of background to this picture. He took a picture of a bus that I think has been decorated inside, so it's got a bookcase in, which is quite clear to see in the photos. I'm not sure if anyone lives in the bus. It does look like it's a lived-in bus, or it's a bus that people can go on and, drink on or something. But it's certainly been decorated. And, you can see this figure, and it's so clear. I mean, I pointed out to Jim that it almost looks like a mannequin. It's such a clear picture of a head. And on one of the longer shots, you can even see a body, an arm, and what looks like a leg. Now, you guys will know that I'm one of the biggest advocates of pareidolia going. That's the ability to see faces and shapes where there aren't any. And I'm always cautious of that when I'm looking at photos like this. But it's that clear and it's that obvious that you're looking at a head and a face that I pointed out that it looks like a mannequin. It's almost like whoever's decorated this bus and furnished this bus has put a mannequin in there. But it does look slightly opaque and the body looks slightly see-through and it does look slightly strange. And that's what's making me think it might not be a mannequin. Is it a ghost? I can't say whether it is for certain. But it's definitely a few interesting photos. And I know Jim's very happy with what he caught and I'm very happy that he felt the need to share them with me. So thank you very much for that, Jim. I'll be certain to put it in my presentations in future, try and get other people's opinions on what they think that could be, and I'll be sure to give you any feedback that people give me regarding the photos. So thanks for that. Right, so on to today's interview with Dave, and I hope you enjoy it. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Dave to the show. How you doing, mate?
Very good, thank you. Sitting here stuck in my house, but it doesn't stop us from having a chat this evening.
No, it's it's actually been difficult to pin people down, ironically. You'd think people wouldn't have much better to do than interview podcasts, but luckily you've agreed to come on, which is great. Looking forward to it. Yep. So I've kind of introduced you as the BUFOG guy, the chairman of the Birmingham UFO Group.
Yes.
Which is a fantastic local group to us. Do you want to just give us a bit of background into the group and how you kind of got interested in UFOs to start with, and what made you want to go on and grow this group into what it's become today?
Sure, yeah. Well, if I take things right back to my past, it probably started the same as many people do, with a just general interest in the realms of the paranormal and unexplained mysteries that were out there. I just remember reading Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World and other classic kind of paranormal books back then. Fortune Times, used to get that and just read that. And I just remember just many nights staying up reading it and just really creeping myself out with all these stories. But the more I looked into the UFO angle, the more that kind of became a particular interest for me. I just think there's a lot of evidence on record for the reality of it. And it was just fascinating to me, the idea that we could be being visited by other non-human species, or there was interactions from some other intelligences, leaving the exact origins out of the picture for now. It's always been a fascination of mine. And I've had a kind of general view on that for a good while, and I started reading UFO magazine when I was about 16. The UFO magazine, they started having their yearly conference in Solihull, where I lived, which was very convenient, because obviously back then I didn't drive, so I could just get a bus in. And I just remember going to those early conferences then and just being absolutely fascinated, just hearing researchers at the time talk about cases they were investigating and being on the front lines with it. And I thought how incredible that would be to just get out there and just meet witnesses and just record this incredible stuff that was going on. Now back then, I didn't have any kind of drive at that stage to get into active investigation of the UFO subject. I just had a big interest in it, and when X-Files came around and everything, I'd watch all that. But I could have started actively investigating quite a lot sooner than I did probably, but it was the formation of Birmingham UFO Group which really kick-started that for me. Possibly the reason was the other groups were a bit further out. There was UFO Research Midlands, but that wasn't particularly convenient to reach where they held their meetings. But when BUFOG started up, it initially had its meetings in Quinton. Now, I wasn't always the chairman for the group, so I didn't start this thing myself. It was started by a couple of other gents named Craig and Mark, and they organised it, and we just came across it online. So I was one of the first members to sign up for the group. I just thought it'd be really good just to get together with other people who'd had an interest in the subject and maybe hear about some of the things that they'd seen. And back at that point, I hadn't had any significant sightings myself, but I certainly believed that it was a very real thing. So the meeting started in the corner of this pub. Really, it wasn't even a meeting room as such. We'd just get together and just have a bit of a chinwag for a number of hours. But in one of the first meetings that we had, there were a group of 4 lads had turned up in their early 20s, and they'd very recently had an incredible close encounter. And I was talking with them in depth about it, and it was amazing. And it had taken place at King's Winford in North Birmingham. Basically, they'd seen an octagonal shaped black craft with red and white lights in the underside of it that flew right over their heads, and they saw it for a prolonged period of time. And it was amazing just hearing them firsthand talk about something that recently happened to them. And I thought it'd be great to go out to the actual location to where this had taken place. I just thought it'd be really interesting to go out there with them to this clearing in the woods where this had happened. And Craig and Mark approached me and they said, well, how do you fancy investigating this for us officially for the group and writing up a bit of a report on it? And I said, yeah, I'd be well up for that. So what I did when we went out there for the first time, I didn't tell them I was going to interview them at all. But when we got out there, I interviewed each of them independently and got them to draw independent drawings of what they'd seen, which all correlated, and it was quite obvious that they'd had a real experience. And from that, I built a detailed case report with all the drawings and everything inside, and gave it back to Craig and Mark, and we put it on the Birmingham UFO Group website. And that was, for me, my first official investigation of a UFO case. So from that point onwards, I got taken on as the investigator for the group, occasionally getting outside help from other investigators, but I'd say over 90% of the cases were investigated by myself. Got to 2009, about sort of early 2009, and Craig and Mark, for them, it was a kind of short-term thing, and they weren't up for running the group as chairman sort of on a long-term basis. So they thought, who better to take over the running of the group than myself? So they approached me with that position. I absolutely took it on, and happy to take on those additional duties. And ever since then, ever since 2009, I've been keeping the group running. We have a really nice active community with regular monthly meetings. Obviously not on at the moment due to the virus outbreak. But, sort of temporarily put them on hold, but we have regular monthly meetings in Albury where we invite speakers to come and talk. Sometimes I'll obviously give lectures myself, and we screen documentaries and things like that. So it's really, really good.
I was really interested in what you mentioned earlier there. You were clearly interested in the paranormal side of things as well from a young age, but it's almost like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like the physical, the nuts and the bolts of UFO sightings is what attracted you more. So with spirits, it's very sometimes wishy-washy. Do they exist? Do they not exist? But with a UFO, is it the physicality of it? Is it the fact that there is a nuts and bolt craft that people witness? Is that what attracts you more?
Yeah, possibly. Although I fully also believe in the ghosts are a very real thing, and apparitions. So in some ways, you've got physical manifestations with that side of the paranormal too. And I could have easily become a sort of general paranormal investigator, but I don't know why I've always been particularly fascinated by the UFO thing. I just think some of the bigger cases on record have got so much evidence to back them up. A lot of that evidence is testimonial, but when you've got cases involving hundreds of witnesses, high-ranking military personnel, astronauts, etc., talking about this stuff and saying it's really going on, you have to take that on board.
Of course, yeah. I mean, so you mentioned there how you've become an investigator, and in fact, I first came across you because of my UFO sighting years ago now, and that's how I found out about you guys. So I reached out, and so with the investigation side of things, was that something that you enjoyed more than the research into it? Because in my opinion, it's the same with ghosts. There's two different ways there. You can kind of be an armchair person and just research famous cases that already exist and put your own spin on it, or you can go out and actually grab kind of frontline sightings, raw, unique sightings that no one else has really heard of because you're the first person to investigate it. Was that the main appeal?
Yes, absolutely. Everybody's read about the bigger cases on record. There's hundreds of books and websites covering these main cases, and some of them are, of course, very, very dramatic. But I've always been fascinated by the cases just being seen by everyday folk, just regular members of the community. And it was those cases that started coming in via the group, and I could go and actively investigate and speak with people, take down their details and get their stories out there for everybody else to read up on and take on board. Absolutely fascinating, and there's some of the reward of putting out the case reports has been the fact that in some cases we've actually had new witnesses come forward. So I've uploaded a case report quite soon after the incident has occurred, and other people have gone searching for it online because they've seen the same thing from a different place. And they didn't realise that anybody else has seen it, and they've come across my case online because, of course, they go typing in to see if their local area UFO sighting, and up comes the case report because it's directly linked with Google. So so that's absolutely brilliant when that happens, and that's occurred on a number of occasions.
Okay, so I mean, as time's gone on, so that was 2009 when you really started this, so we're well over.
Well, that's that's when I did the chairman duties. It was early 2008 that I really became an investigator. So
okay, so it's
12 years.
Longer than a decade now.
Yes.
Have you found that there's been an abundance of people coming through, asking for your kind of investigative skills. Has that happened kind of as a steady abundance of people throughout that decade, or has it increased? Has it decreased?
I'd say it's pretty much steady. We got quite an influx in the first year. I think that was just because of the excitement of the group springing up, and then things tended to settle. But occasionally you get these alarmist articles that go out in the newspaper. Ufology is dead in the UK. The aliens have all gone home, and this sort of nonsense. Yeah, and I assure you, they haven't at all. Now, not every case that I investigate is a new case. Yeah, so I get just as many cases from the past. Yeah, so I'll go and give a talk, for example, somewhere, and people in the audience will then come to talk with me about cases that have happened decades ago from earlier in their life that they just want to discuss with me, and then with their permission, I'll write up a report and get the information out there, and it serves as a kind of lasting record in a way of what they've experienced. But new cases still do come in. Some of the most recent cases have actually been IFOs. They've been the SpaceX launch of the satellites, Elon Musk's SpaceX program. So they are basically, there's hundreds of satellites that he's launching up in big long streams up into space, and they basically just look like a straight line of satellites following along one after the other. And of course, if you don't know what that is, it just looks incredible, and I've had numerous people come to me. I haven't seen them myself yet directly, but there's lots of photos online, and it immediately became apparent that that's what they'd seen. So in those cases, we were able to identify them. But we still get in other cases of a disc-shaped craft of glowing orbs of light that shoot away very, very fast, etc. Just all sorts of cases still continue to this day.
Okay, so you mentioned there about how people will talk to you about things that have happened to them years and years ago in their lives. I personally think that's because it is quite a taboo subject still. And I have very close friends who, I love dearly, but they still ridicule me for my beliefs in the paranormal and UFO. So it's a very difficult thing to come out and talk to people about. Do you find that? Do you find a lot of people are very reluctant to talk to you? Do they want to remain anonymous?
Absolutely, yeah. In over half of the case reports that I put out, people don't want to reveal their name. In some cases, they don't even want to reveal the town that they live in. Now, I try to get as many location details as possible because that increases the chances of other witnesses coming forward.
Yeah.
But in some cases, they weren't even happy about that because they're, for one or two different reasons, they're rather scared of the ridicule, and they just definitely don't want anybody finding out that it was them who gave me the details. But in other cases, they're sort of paranoid that something's going to happen bad to them. They're going to get the men in black come to the door or whatever, and that they're going to be in trouble if they talk about and release the details of what they've seen. There's lots of viewpoints surrounding that, and it's very hard sometimes not to get paranoid when you realise this is really going on. I certainly believe that there's a kind of worldwide cover-up of this subject. So if there's a worldwide cover-up, then you have to ask the people in charge of that cover-up, what are they doing? Who are they? Are they monitoring our group? Are they monitoring all the witnesses I speak with? It's hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, I always say it about ghosts, and I think it's the same really with UFOs, is a lot of people do ridicule the subject, but I can guarantee that 9.9 people out of 10 have all had a UFO sighting or a ghost sighting. And when you get them on their own or when they're away from their friends and they're not showing off, they quite often do say, actually, a few years ago there was something that happened and I can't explain. Do you find that? Do you find that that the people that are come across as staunch, non-believers have actually all got a story?
Yes, yeah. Most people really. They'll either had something happen to them directly, or they'll at least know somebody who has. And I think that ridicule thing is a real problem with the subject and continues to be.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, this is done. It's because of the media's portrayal of the subject over the years. It's always been portrayed as a bit kooky, a bit sidelined.
Yeah.
And that's when the documentaries go out, even recent UFO documentaries, a lot of the reason I don't appear regularly on television with this is because of the general media's portrayal of the subject, and I can't trust them not to do that with it. And I've been invited to appear on programs that I've turned down, and then I've seen the end result and been glad that I haven't.
Yeah. I mean, just talking about the media there, in recent months, there's been a massive increase in mainstream media actually talking about the possibility that UFOs exist. We had the Navy, the US Navy release files,
yes,
things like that. So it seems to be like it's becoming more and more mainstream. Now, do you think that there's an agenda behind that? Because in my opinion, there has to be a reason why they've gone from staunch kind of suppressors of the subject and ridiculers to all of a sudden, actually, no, this could be a real thing. Is there an agenda there from the media?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think this is partially due to the Pentagon's admissions in 2017, which you're talking about, which link on to what the Navy said. So basically, if anybody listening to the podcast who isn't aware of this, in late 2017, the Pentagon and the US Navy both officially acknowledged the reality of UFOs. So there's no argument anymore about them being here. Now, they haven't used the word aliens. They haven't said they're alien. But what they said is that there are objects making intelligent maneuvers that are massively outperforming the American military. The American military is the strongest military force on the planet. Yeah, they've got the most high-tech aircraft, etc. Yeah. So if these objects are massively outperforming them, then they're clearly from outside. They're not from China. They're not from Russia or anywhere else. They're from outside. And these things are performing obviously intelligent maneuvers. They usually act quite defensively and fly away when planes get within near to them. They'll just suddenly shoot up thousands of feet or whatever. And they've always acted in that way right back to the 50s. When they first started looking into these things. But I mean, this announcement is incredibly impressive. It's a form of disclosure, but not the disclosure that everybody wants. Yeah, the disclosure that everybody wants, right, is all the governments of the world getting up on stage and saying, okay, it's real. There's no argument about this anymore. This is real, and with that, they would show evidence of it being real. Oh, here's some aliens. Oh, here's a live one who's going to come talk with you now. Now, that hasn't happened. There are very, very good reasons for why that hasn't happened. So a lot of people say to me, okay, if this cover-up's going on, surely in the modern world we can cope with this. Just tell us the truth, But the reality is that the public would find it very, very hard to deal with certain aspects of this subject, because it's not just UFOs flying around in the sky, their craft flying about and things and checking people out from a distance. You've got the whole contact phenomena going on where they're taking people from their own houses, from their own cars, etc. Now, if you say it's real, then the next question is, okay, are abductions real? And they would have to say, yes, that's actually going on. People would say, okay, you've got to stop that, and they would have to say, we can't.
Yeah.
So
I mean, people are saying that people are struggling to cope with what's going on now with the current pandemic.
Yes.
We sold out a toilet roll in the first few days.
Exactly.
So I don't really want to think about what would happen if they did tell us that extraterrestrials were abducting us against our will.
And there's other aspects that go even darker than that. You've got the animal mutilation phenomena, which I believe is definitely linked with the UFO phenomena. You've even got human mutilation cases, where humans have been found with similar wounds to animals.
Is that true? I've never. Yeah. I'm a massive follower of cattle mutilation. I know, like Linda Moulton Howe has done a lot into that, and that fascinates me. But I've never heard of humans.
I'll send you some. I'll send you some links after our chat.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
It's pretty dark, to be fair.
Yeah.
And it's definitely something that the military or the government would not want to publicly acknowledge. And this is the cover up for mutilations is another part where we're seeing a real cover up involved in that, because researchers who are looking into that particular aspect of cases, when the animals have died and they try to get hold of autopsy reports, something which they'd usually have access to. Yeah, they're not allowed. They're not following standard protocol for these mutilation cases. They're trying to cover it up, trying to stop them from getting the details about what's happened with those animals. Now that shows straight away that there's something odd going on with that they don't want to admit to the general public, and they don't like it when people get sniffing around.
Wow. Okay. So with the cases that you've had,
yes,
I've always been fascinated with the trends of UFO sightings. So when they were first, we had, is it Kenneth Arnold who spotted the flying saucers?
Yes.
And because he said they were like flying saucers, all of the sightings thereafter were of flying saucers. And then as things have changed throughout time, we've gone through phases of cigar shapes. And now as the military's craft has kind of gone more stealth-like, triangular, we've had a massive influx of triangular spotted craft. So do you find that, is there a link between that, the trend of UFO sightings and military, I guess, equipment? And do you think that the trend is more people being told what they should be seeing and therefore they're seeing it like that?
I think it's partially that. I think it's partially misidentification of military hardware. Yeah. So, for example, no doubt some of the flying triangle sightings are actually stealth bombers being test flown or whatever, or other advanced craft. Yeah. That said, there have been triangular cases right the way back to the start of the century, believe it or not. They're not widely known, and it seems in recent years that there are more sightings of those. That's certainly a trend that seems to be the case. But there are triangular UFO sightings going right back to the 1900s. Okay. And you've still got disc sightings again. So disc sightings were seen back in 40s, 50s, etc. But they're still seen today. I still get cases in of domed disc-shaped objects.
The classic UFO kind of look. Yeah,
I still get cases in of cigar-shaped craft, although really cigar craft, you had to be careful with that because a disc flying along sideways at a distance will look like a cigar. So they'll describe
I've never thought of that, but that's absolutely right.
So they describe it as a cigar, but really what they're looking at is a disc, and it only becomes a disc when they change the angle and they're looking more up at it. Wow. I get a lot of sightings that are spheres. You get now, obviously, some of those are going to be misidentifications. So it's always, you've got to remember with this that there's a lot of misidentification of mundane objects, and if you don't take that on board as an investigator of UFOs, then you're not doing your job right. Most UFO cases that come into me can be explained away as mundane objects. Now, these sphere sightings, a lot of the time, are going to be balloons. Sometimes released from celebrations, maybe clumped together, maybe they're tethered together, and they're drifting up into the sky, and they look unusual. Or maybe you'll get a fleet of them, and it's they'll describe a fleet of spheres moving around one another, and really it's just a clump of balloons that's drifting at high altitude. That said, I've also dealt with plenty of cases where small spherical, usually kind of chrome silver coloured objects have been seen that have clearly not been balloons. So, for example, there was a case I dealt with where somebody spotted one hovering over the roof of a building in strong wind conditions, and it was hovering dead still, didn't move for several minutes, and then all of a sudden it shoots up straight vertically. Now, nobody's going to tell me that's a balloon.
No, not at all.
So, it's hard to dissociate sometimes, and in actual fact, the movement of the object is almost as important and sometimes more important than how it actually appears.
Yeah, I mean, that what you said there is fascinating because for myself, who investigates more of the ghosts and the paranormal, is again, nine times out of 10, it can be explained away really simply with lighting or, shadows and stuff like that. And although from an investigating point of view, it's painful to have to admit that, yes, that's not a ghost, or in your case, that's not a UFO, it's a balloon. Do you find that sometimes is a limit for other investigators? Do you find that they're so keen and they're so eager for their beliefs to be proven true that they're willing to kind of brush to the side what it could possibly be
100%.
And link it to UFOs?
Yeah, 100%. A lot of ufologists kind of take their sort of viewpoints and push them onto the cases they investigate. So you'll get certain researchers will say a particular thing and find a lot of stuff that fits their particular viewpoint and dismiss other things. You'll get a lot of them who are very skeptically minded, too skeptical, and they want to disprove everything, and everything has to have a mundane explanation. It's not the case with this subject. It really isn't. There's a lot of cases which have at least certain aspects of those cases which cannot be explained away as mundane. And you've got to look at both sides of the coin, and that's how I sit. I'm very much a believer in the reality of this, but I'm also grounded enough to know that a lot of the cases that come in are misidentifications.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a really good way of looking at it because, as I say, there's so many investigators out there that will just push their beliefs, and it's almost like they're convincing themselves and lying to themselves that what they're seeing is a ghost or a UFO when it just isn't.
Yeah, and the same applies for certain beliefs on particular aspects of the subject. So let's talk about origins for a minute. These beings. So I certainly believe that these craft are not just automatic things. I think that they've got occupants. Yeah. So there's many cases on record, and it feeds directly into the contact phenomena, which I've got a particular interest in. Now there's certain types of these beings, species, if you will, that are seen again and again, and people often ask me, where do you think they're from? Well, my personal view, and this is totally based on just the evidence that I've seen, cases that I've read and looked into over the years, right back to childhood, as well as actively investigated. Yeah, my personal view is that they are extraterrestrial in origin, but possess very advanced characteristics, multi-dimensional type capabilities. Now, there are various very good reasons for that. There's a number of contact cases on record where the beings have actually spoken to the people that are taken aboard their craft and have actually told them, we're from this particular star system, and have shown them star maps and that sort of thing. A lot of the time when people are taken, they can look out of a window aboard the craft and they'll see stars outside. They're up in space. They're off planet somewhere. They're either in you could say, okay, they've taken them very, very high up out into the outer limits of the atmosphere or whatever, maybe, but in some cases they appear to have sort of visions of other planets sometimes, strange sort of other worlds, and you have to wonder, are we being shown sort of visions of their home world there? So I think the evidence supports that. And as well, just how advanced they are, and the fact that they're clearly not human, and not. Yeah. But I will never dismiss any other origin belief. So I call them ETs just for short. Because it's nice and simple and runs off the tongue. But and people say, okay, why do you think they're definitely extraterrestrial? And I say, well, I personally believe that, but that doesn't mean I necessarily need to push that view on everybody. If people believe that they're from our future and that have been sent back in time by futuristic humans to collect samples or whatever, other people think that they might be manufactured, by the military, and I think that's unlikely. But even so, other people think that they've always lived here, like some sort of hidden species, and have taken a back step and watched human development while hiding away in the shadows. Again, you'd have to ask why they do that, but who knows? But yeah, there's a number of different theories. Then you've got the kind of angels theory that they're in some way linked with the afterlife or God, and again, that's it shouldn't be dismissed. If people want to have their own viewpoints on what these are, I think the important thing to realise is not exactly where they're from; it's that it involves other intelligences of some kind, non-human intelligences that are interacting with us.
I think so. I think you're right there. I think it's a case of just firstly just agreeing that there is actually something going on.
Yes.
There are sightings and there are contact cases, and people being physically hurt and physically marked by these things. So there's something clearly going on.
Yes.
What it is kind of neither here nor there. This early in the argument, so to speak.
Exactly.
And as long as someone can back it up and prove as to why they believe in a particular theory, I'm always happy to listen to someone develop theories, because that's how we get to a better understanding.
Yeah, you've got to, really. I mean, nothing's set in stone with this subject, and if any researcher tells you that there are things that are set in stone, they're probably kidding themselves. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of unknown variables. I mean, even science itself, even stuff that we say is scientifically proven, can 5 minutes later they'll come up with something else that disproves that, and then straight away those previous viewpoints cease to be relevant. Even the way that our own science works, the things that are officially proven are still not really genuinely proven. 100%.
No, that's absolutely right. You mentioned briefly one of your bigger interests is the contactee side of things.
Oh yeah.
So this is kind of one step further down the road of someone just seeing a UFO. Now they're actually being regularly contacted. Maybe they've been abducted. Do you find that is common? Do you find that that's more common than just seeing a UFO? Is there a link? So do people that see one then go on to become contactees?
There's a definite link with the UFO subject. There's been some researchers have claimed that the two things are completely separate from one another. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. That is that viewpoint. I'll put it there. It is. Most contactees, most contact experiences will have an aspect of the UFO subject in them. Quite often they'll see a UFO and then they'll have an abduction type experience following it. They'll also tend to, if they're having repeat experiences, so you get different types of contactees, abductees, whatever you want to call them. You get people who have a single experience, so they might be driving along at night and they see a UFO and they get taken aboard it, and then they never have any other experiences. It's just that one thing has happened, almost like they've just been there at the wrong time and they've seen them and picked them up. Yeah. Then you get other cases, repeater cases, where an individual appears to have regular contact throughout their life, and it often begins in childhood, sort of 5 or 6 years old, and it can carry on throughout their whole life. Sometimes there might be periods of time where it vanishes, so it might vanish for sort of 10 or so years, and then inexplicably all of a sudden it's back again and they're having further experiences. And we don't really know the reason for those gaps or anything. They're usually not told. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely going on. It's definitely a real thing. Do
you find family links? You just mentioned there about from being a young age.
Yeah.
Do you find if someone's a regular abductee, is it their mom was or their dad was, or?
Yes. Yeah, and often you'll find that sort of genetic bloodline. What I believe is going on about this, and we're getting into the sort of deep aspects of contact here and what I believe the agendas is. I think that they are following particular genetic bloodlines over multiple generations, possibly manipulating genes over time to see how it changes, like an ongoing experiment.
Okay, so sticking with the same DNA.
Yes, yeah. Okay. Now, often with where you get that occur over numerous generations, you'll be able to see it follow a particular side of the family. So you might have the grandmother will have experiences, the mother will have experiences, and then the daughter will have experiences. But the father and the grandfather won't really have experiences, or they might be indirectly linked with a couple of them. So they might have been there when things have gone on, but haven't been the focus of those experiences. In other times they're aware that they're going on, but they're completely removed from them. So they might be there at the time, but they'll be shut down. So quite often, when people are taken, if there are other people around, and this is one of the reasons why there's not that many observations. There are some cases on record where people have been observed being abducted, but a lot of the time they seem to kind of shut down the area. There's this weird, there's all sorts of odd anomalies with the contact subject, and it's a reason why a lot of researchers don't want to go there, because it's too way out. There's all sorts of really, really unusual aspects that go on with it. Yeah. But there's this kind of time distortion element where the area surrounding where it's going on, time will appear to kind of slow down or even stop, and they can shut people down. So if there's another person there, they can go into a kind of trance-like state. Sometimes they'll be lying down. Sometimes they'll even be standing up, but just completely unaware, and they'll just be standing in this trance. It's almost like they've been switched off temporarily, and then after the experience, everything will go back to normal.
Well, that's a massive kind of can of worms in itself. I mean, I've read of cases where aliens beings have taken an abductee through a roof. So it's like they've kind of manipulated the atoms of a structure or of a wall or a ceiling to take you through it.
Yes.
So it's almost like they're operating outside of our frequency range, which is of huge interest to myself, as you know.
Absolutely.
But what are we dealing with there? I mean, if these things can alter time, if they can put us into a trance, if they can manipulate physical walls and physical kind of construct, then what's going on there?
Exactly. Yeah, it's very hard to stop these things from happening. So I've spoken with numerous people who said, is there any way of stopping this from happening? And a lot of the, there's some advice that can be given sometimes, like if you shout at them and tell them you definitely don't want this to occur. There's been a number of cases where they've done that and seemingly their contact has stopped, but in a lot of cases it doesn't. And the best thing for people to do who are undergoing these experiences is, first of all, get past that kind of fear of them and allow them to become a sort of more normal part of their life and just accepting of them. Now, fascinatingly, in some cases, that can actually change what happens with their experiences. So we're getting into another aspect of contact here. So a lot of the time when people are taken, they're paralyzed. Now that leads some skeptics to believe that sleep paralysis and that is what's happening with contact. Yeah, that's absolutely incorrect, completely and utterly incorrect. Yeah, there were definite differences between a contact experience and a sleep paralysis experience. There are aspects that are similar, one of which is the paralysis thing. Yeah, but I've dealt with plenty of contact cases where the individual isn't paralyzed at all, can freely move both before and during their experience. Now, in some cases, where you get repeated cases where somebody will have contact throughout their life and they've had numerous abductions, at first, when they're very, very frightened, they'll be paralyzed and they won't be able to move, and it'll all be really, really cryptic and really terrifying. And then later on, when they're older, they'll have experiences where they're allowed to move and sometimes even have deep interactions with the beings. They'll have proper conversations with them. The beings may show them around their craft and that sort of thing. Now, the interesting thing is it seems to be related to how they're acting in those experiences, and it makes me wonder whether the beings kind of trust them more not to lash out or hurt themselves, or try to fight back against it. And because of that, they've then allowed them to move and no longer be paralyzed. You get the same thing occur with screen memories. So screen memories is where the beings mask the appearance of themselves or their craft. This is really fascinating aspect.
Yeah, I've heard about this. Quite often with owls and
that's right, and
things like that. Yeah,
I'm currently that's probably because of the similarity between an owl's face with the big black eyes and
and a grey
around. So you get this going on again and again, and I'm currently writing a new lecture on this particular aspect because it's of particular interest to me. So with that, again, quite often screen memories occur when the contactee is quite young, when they're a child. The beings will appear to them as something else. Yeah, it can be a cartoon character, it can be another member of their family, it can be a little doctor guy, all sorts of things. And then later on in their life, they'll see them in their normal form. It's almost like the beings are aware that their actual form is no longer going to frighten them or scare them off, and that they're able to deal with it better. I don't know whether that's the case. I can't say for definite. This is just theories on my observations.
Do you find that through all the contact cases that you've investigated, is there ever any malicious ones? Because of course, the first thing that people think about when aliens abduct you is it's evil. They're doing experiments on you. I mean, I remember that film Fire in the Sky that I used to watch so much when I was younger about Travis Walton, and it used to scare the hell out of me. Yeah. And that's what people think. People think that when you get abducted, they operate on you and it's horrible. But there are actually a lot of positive experiences out there, as you say, people that get shown star systems and people that get kind of almost they get given prophecies to come back to spread around the world. Do you find that there's an even split between kind of benign and malicious contactee cases?
Yeah, I would say in some ways it's kind of closer towards the positive, or rather neutral, shall I say. So a lot of the cases are terrifying, but they're not terrifying because they're being malicious. It's terrifying because it's so out of the norm. And the greys, especially the beings that people most often report with contact, they are quite cryptic, and sometimes they won't say anything at all to the person. They just go about doing what they're doing, almost like worker drones. Sometimes I'll say a few words to them. There are aspects of it. Sometimes I'll try to calm them down, so they'll either stare directly into their eyes up close, or sometimes put their hand on the top of their head, and the person will feel a kind of wave of calm go through them. So if they start to sort of panic, the beings have this way of calming them down. Now you could say, okay, they're being nice to the abductee there. That's for their benefit. But is it, or is it just so that they struggle less and try to fight back less? Yeah. So there's two sides of looking to most of this. You can either view it in a kind of positive light, or a negative, or a more negative light, and say that we're being harvested in some way. Yeah. But there's a lot of cases on record where people have got really, really deep interactions with these beings. Quite often in repeat cases, there'll be a particular entity that they'll feel drawn to, and it'll feel like another member of their family. And they'll often have interaction with that one particular being, even though there are other beings that are also seen that look identical to it. Yeah. So the greys especially all all look relatively similar to one another. You get different kind of subtypes. There's different colours are reported, sometimes different heights. Quite often they're sort of about 4 foot high, like children's size. But there were some cases where really short ones have been seen, about 2 foot high. Other ones where massive, tall, thin ones have been seen. And in actual fact, that was actually represented by Steven Spielberg in the classic film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Yeah. If you remember at the end of the film, when the doors open, there's hundreds of these little guys running around, and then in the middle of it, there's a taller one with sort of long, thin arms. Yeah. Now Stephen took that idea from real contact cases, because he'd heard that in numerous cases, and it doesn't always happen, but certainly I've dealt with quite a few contact cases where that exact thing has been seen.
Oh. So I mean, one thing that's interested me as well is you always hear people say, "Oh, if you're getting abducted, then it's because you live in Texas, or you live in like kind of the south of the United States." Is that the case? Does there seem to be more abduction cases over there stateside? Is it because the population's bigger? Is it because they're more keen to talk about it? We're probably more, I guess, reserved, and we don't want to talk about it as much?
Yeah, that'd be right. Yeah, I believe that this is going on worldwide, and I think that the differences can be down to population size as well as how accepted the subject is. So in America, it's a lot less taboo. A lot more Americans are open to the idea that the government is hiding the reality from them, and that abductions are a real thing. And that leads on to nicely into the contactee support that we offer through BUFOG. So across in America, you've got lots and lots of abductee support groups. If you go searching online, you'll find there's groups available for contactees to meet up and chat about their experiences with one another. Yeah, you look in the UK, it's next to zero. So. Yeah. So soon, it was about 2010, I believe, we started the contactee support thing. Basically, I wanted to do something for the cases in the UK that were going on, because obviously over half of my contact, I've dealt with about 300 or so contact cases now. About over half of those have been UK based. Yeah, I'd say 2/3 of them are UK based. But I do deal with cases from all around the world. I've dealt with cases from Australia, so. I take on whatever cases come my way. Obviously, it's impossible to meet up with people directly, but in this virtual age, I can just chat with them on Skype with video, and it's like we're in the same room. Of course, so there should no longer be a limiter to distance, and I didn't want it to be. And with the contactee support, I thought, well, it'd be good to kind of get a group going where the contactees would be able to talk with one another in a confined and closed environment, without fear of ridicule, and be able to run ideas past one another, talk about their experiences, ask questions. So, but I didn't want the distance to be a limiter to that. I didn't want to say, okay, we're going to have regular meetings in Birmingham, because obviously anybody outside of the Midlands, be probably too much of a drive for them. So I figured the best way to do that would be an online support group. So we set up a chat room on the BUFOG website, a private chat room that contactees could join in with. I'm planning to get that up and running on the new site soon, but I've recently rebuilt the site from the ground up, and at the moment that's an aspect of it that I'm still working on implementing. But I regularly provide support for abductees, contactees. Regularly provide that support for them over the phone. It's particularly relevant because contact is often laughed at. And that's because of the media portrayal of it and how just wild some of the experiences can be. But it causes all manner of dreadful upset. Not only do the experiences themselves cause long-lasting trauma, real long-term psychological issues with the people involved. It can also break apart relationships. I've dealt with cases where people have been close to suicide with it. So when you see these cases, when you see it laughed about and treated like a big joke, the reality is down on the ground that it's deeply affecting people's lives, and it's no laughing matter.
No, I mean what you've just said there, I think is really, really poignant, because if we just kind of just stop all the kind of talking about this and the ifs and the buts, if this was real and there are these physical beings that are taking you aboard a ship against your own will, and they're doing things to you, and no matter how benign they try to come across, it is scary.
Yes.
And if that's happening to you, whether it be on a regular basis, whether it just be once, and you don't have anyone to turn to, and your closest friends or your closest family don't believe you and ridicule you. That must be very, very lonely. A very lonely place to be.
Yeah. The amount of people that have told me, when I've talked with them about their experiences, have just thanked me, from the bottom of their heart, just for, having a voice of reason, somebody they could talk with, who just didn't treat them immediately as a nut.
Just for listening, really, yeah.
And I never try to push my views onto those individuals. I usually, because if they ask me questions about what my views are on particular things that are happening to them, the very first thing for me to do with them will be to get down the details of their experience. That's one of my protocols with investigation. I don't want my viewpoints on particular aspects of this subject to change how they view their own experiences. So the very first thing I'll do with them is go through everything that's happened to them. Yeah. And only after that start delving into what my thoughts are on particular things.
So do you want to? I mean, for our listeners,
yes,
me and Dave have already agreed that Dave's gonna come back on and we're gonna do a one-off special on a case that Dave has told me about before. It's a fascinating case, but we both agreed that it would take up far too much of this show and we wouldn't have been able to talk about anything else really. So we're going to talk about that at a later date. But have you got maybe another case that you can quickly discuss, just to give people a feeling of the kind of things that are happening out there, the things that people do approach you about?
Yeah, I mean, do you want a contact case or a sighting case?
We'll go with a contact case.
Yeah, well, I can tell you about one that contains a visitation. A visitation is where the beings appear in the local environment to an individual. So they're not taken aboard a craft, but they see the beings. So we'll talk about a case that involves a visitation and also what's known as automatic writing. So basically a script that appears to be an alien language. This is a really fascinating case. Okay, so this is one from way back. I think I investigated this one in 2010, if I remember correctly, and it involved a young chap, mid-20s, from Dudley, and I'd gone up to see him. He had no interest in the UFO subject whatsoever. Okay, so he'd had an experience, and he wanted to talk to me about it. So he found our group online, got in touch, and I drove up to Dudley to have a proper chat with him. And immediately became apparent that he had no real interest in the UFO subject, but he'd seen what had happened to him, and he'd looked online and found out that it was potentially linked with contact, so got in touch. So essentially, what had happened is there was a particular night. Now in his bedroom at the time, they sold the bed, so they just had the mattress lying on the ground of the bedroom. They're waiting for a new bed to turn up, so we're right down near the floor. So him and his girlfriend, they're right down near floor level. And they'd gone off to sleep. They got into bed and got on this mattress, so they're right low down. And his girlfriend had dropped off to sleep, and he's lying there looking around the room. Yeah, and he starts to see these weird squiggling shapes, these little black darting worm-like things darting around, and he's following them with his eyes and thinking, what's going on? Yeah. It's an odd aspect of this particular case. You get all sorts of these little aspects, and sometimes they're repeated, and other times they seem kind of almost more unique. Yeah. But often preceding a contact experience, the individual can often see odd visual stuff going on in the room. Changing colours, weird shadows that don't make sense, that sort of thing. Okay. So you've seen these little things darting around, and then he rolls over to kind of follow one of them. And he's immediately greeted by the sight of three greys standing alongside the mattress right next to him. Now, don't forget, he rolls over at this point, so he can put sleep paralysis out the window. He could move. Yeah. He can move freely. Yeah. So he looks at these things. They had very, very tall craniums, black almond-shaped eyes. They were wearing these tight sort of dark grey bodysuits, and they're just standing there alongside the bed in a row, three of them, He's obviously shocked by this. He doesn't know what they are. He doesn't know that they're called greys. They're not actually called greys. It's what humans call them because of the general colour of their skin. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Nobody really knows what they're actually called, if they're called anything at all. Anyway, the one nearest to his shoulder, it reaches out for him. Yeah, so he said he drew a picture of its hand. It had like 4 fingers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it reaches out towards him, and that's commonly reported that they got sort of 4 fingers. Reaches out towards him. To react against that, he rolls back over. He rolls back over, tries to shake his girlfriend awake. Remember I said earlier in the chat that people can be shut down, yeah?
Yeah.
So he couldn't wake her up yet. So he's shaking her vigorously, yeah, but she's fast asleep. She won't wake up. He's hitting her on the arm. She's not waking up yet. He rolls back over, and as he looks up, there's something above him in the air, yeah? Weird thing, kind of almost like lizard-like, but with this kind of, it had a sort of snouty nose and a kind of almost like a ghost-like tail with his two arms. Okay. It was some sort of black apparition thing, like a shadowy apparition of something. Could have links with the reptilians, one of the types of beings that they're reported species, if you will. Anyway, this thing sinks down and goes into his chest, and just falls down into him. Yeah, as it sinks into him, he blacks out. So that's quite commonly reported with experiences. So they'll be having an experience of visitation and then all of a sudden blackout. Yeah, almost like they're sedated and they'll just drop. Next thing he knows, it's morning time and he's waking back up. Yeah, asks his girlfriend. She doesn't remember anything about it, and he told her about what he could remember about these beings standing alongside the bed. Okay, so about a day goes by, and he suddenly feels the urge to write. He doesn't know why. Yeah, so he grabs a pen and he grabs a pad of paper, and he starts writing. And he starts writing these weird symbols. Yeah, they're curled lines and dots and things. Yeah, it starts off as random congregations of these in kind of rough, short lines. Yeah, but it soon becomes quite regularized. Yeah, and he's drawing vertical line after line after line of these things. Yeah, and it's a language. And he ends up drawing 24 A4 pages of script. Wow. Well, it's actually 23 and a half pages. Yeah. He showed me all this he'd drawn. He did it over numerous sessions. Yeah. And he said that when he thought about it, his hand would stop. Yeah. It was only when he just let it go by itself. And he'd just sit there writing these symbols down, line after line after line. Yeah. Didn't know what they meant or anything. Doesn't know any kind of deeper meaning to them. Gets to halfway across page 23 and it just stopped, and I said, what's going on there? What's going on there? And he said, whatever this was, that was the end of whatever it was, the end of the message.
How long did that happen over? Was that, did that all happen at once? Period of days?
Period of days, so he'd feel the urge to write, and he'd write a few pages and then stop, and then later on and just go again.
And it was clearly a language because there were repeated symbols, I guess, like we have repeated letters.
Now this is where things get really interesting. So I was like, wow, this is amazing. Yeah. So first of all, it's not any known Earth language, okay, and it is an alphabet. Yeah. So you get repeated symbols to it. It's quite a lot of symbols. There's far more than 24, but there's a lot. There's repeated. You see the same symbols again and again through it by looking carefully at it.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's something, okay? Here's a really interesting thing. He had no idea what this actually meant at all. Yeah, it was just there, and we could do with it whatever we liked. And I hope to get it looked at by a proper sort of cartographer at some point, to see if there's any sort of deeper meaning to it. Now, here's the interesting thing. There's a contact case on record from many years before with a guy named Mike Oram. I don't know if you're aware of Mike at all or not, but
no.
He's a repeat contactee. He'd had numerous experiences going back to childhood. Now, the beings that he saw, they were kind of like greys, but they had sort of three parts to their head almost. He called them the flower people because their head reminded him of a
wow. Okay,
the heads reminded him of a tulip flower opening. Yeah. Okay. So kind of 3 points at the top of their head, but the face was generally a grey, with the black eyes and
yeah.
So there was some sort of subspecies of greys or whatever. Anyway, one of his experiences, he'd been given this information download, it's called. This is where you suddenly get kind of symbols or some sort of message or pictures inside your brain directly. Sometimes the beings will pass it to you. Other times you'll just get it without seeing any beings there. Okay. Yeah. So he had this experience where he was shown these symbols and they were coming up in his mind, and he wrote them down, and he wrote down about sort of eight short kind of passages of these symbols, and he had a rough feeling on what they were related to, but he wasn't told exactly what they meant. All he knew is that he was supposed to kind of show them to people, and people would read them, and it would change them on a subconscious level or something. Yeah.
Okay.
So he had these symbols, and they were in his book and everything. Now, remember, this guy I went and spoke with in Dudley, he had no idea about UFOs. He had no interest in who Mike Oram was or about contact or anything, okay? I looked at these symbols that Mike Oram had drawn, and we got over a sort of about 92% hit rate on them. So most of
they matched?
Yeah, pretty much all of Mike Orum's symbols are inside this passage of script, yeah, except for there's plenty of other symbols that aren't, yeah. There's loads of other symbols in the guy's script from Dudley that Mike Orum had never drawn, but I was able to match up, yeah, because immediately as soon as I saw this script, I thought this is really reminiscent of, and I remembered that these drawings that Mike had done in his case. And I went and looked at them, and I showed the symbols to Mike, and he basically said that's the closest we've ever got. You know, he'd seen numerous, because it's not the only cases involving symbols. Yeah. It's not like it happens all the time. Yeah, it's only kind of less than 5% of contact cases, but there is still quite a lot of cases on record where people have drawn weird scripts, and quite often they don't seem to match any other scripts. They seem to be quite unique. But in this case, we had it's quite obvious that they're the same language.
Wow.
And yeah, Mike was pretty impressed with that, when I showed him and everything. It's just an incredible case, because you've got the visitation by somebody who has no interest in the subject.
Yeah, which is interesting in itself, because he knows they're not lying, or they're looking for their bit of fame.
Oh yeah, this is real, and I know he wasn't looking for his bit of fame, because later on I contacted him back to ask whether he'd had any further experiences, just to do a checkup, and he basically told me to go away. He said he'd just moved on with his life and he wanted to put it behind him. So it wasn't like he was trying to make anything big of it and everything. He just said to me, well, we spoke before, I gave you the details of what happened, and I'm just trying to get on with my life.
Does that response kind of show, was he scared? Was he trying to put it behind him because he was scared of what he'd...
No, it didn't appear to be. It's just it's just, in some cases, people will have an experience and it'll change them. And they'll either get a massive fascination with the UFO subject and want to lap it up ever since. In other cases, the opposite. They'll be extremely frightened by it. With this, it was just he just went about his life. It happened. It was a weird thing that happened to him. It didn't really change his life on a massive level. And I've spoken with lots of people like that. And sometimes it can be how weird the experience is and how outside of the norm it is. They'll be like, okay, it happened. I'll just put it back in my mind. I'll just get on with things.
That's not a reaction you think about, really, is it? You always think about they're going to dive into it and be crying out for another experience, or absolutely fearful of what they've seen and hoping it never happens again. But to kind of just be so blasé and just go, just as if he's popped down the pub for a pint and it happened. That's a very bizarre way of looking at it.
It's interesting. But you've also got the kind of skeptical one where, somebody will have an incredible experience. They might say a landed craft and a being come out, and they'll still dismiss it. And they'll be like, no, I must have had one too many.
I think that goes back to what we spoke of earlier, where you have the people that are so desperate to prove their belief, and then at the other end of the spectrum, you have the people that, if an alien was to kind of physically grab them and take them on board the ship, and like a fireman's lift, they'd still find a way to explain it away.
That's it. Yeah. They're so desperate for it to not be, another intelligence or not be an alien.
Yeah,
there's got to be a rational, mundane explanation for this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll start kind of wrapping it up there. Do you want to please give as much information as you can to our listeners? So your websites, any way they can contact you, because I'm absolutely positive there's listeners out there who've had experiences who'd like to talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very active investigator. There's not that many really truly active investigators in the UK anymore. UFO groups are shutting down left, right, and centre. Other ones are sometimes springing up, but it's few and far between, and that's because it does require a lot of sort of dedicated time and effort to keep it going. But it's a fascination to me. I'm more than happy to speak with people about their experiences. That doesn't necessarily mean that I have to write a report. So I'm not like a journalist who'll just jump on details and just put them out there. It's always done with the discretion of the individual involved, if they want their name taken out, details taken out, etc. But it's a good way of getting it on record and sharing it with the wider community, so other people can learn from their experience. And as I said before, sometimes it's led to other witnesses coming forward, so it's definitely a worthwhile thing to do. If anybody wants to get in touch, so our main website is www.bufog.com. That's BUFOG.com. all the case reports that I've written over the years are on there. There's hundreds of case reports to read on there and a wealth of other information. There's a sighting report form that they can fill out on that, and that will come through to me via email. There's also my direct email address and phone number. If people want to get in touch directly via phone or email, I'm more than happy to. And we can arrange a chat on Skype. If the individual lives in the Birmingham area and if there's no virus going on, I can go. What do you know? There is. But yeah, I can go and meet them directly as well. And I have been doing that obviously up until this point from time to time. So there's lots of different ways people can get in touch. If people want to remain anonymous, that's absolutely fine. They can just pass me the details on an email and then say that they don't want me to get back to them. That's also fine. Although often I won't have the full details and it'll end up with a kind of sporadic report, and there would have been other things I could have asked, but I'm unable to, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
In between meetings and also permanently at the moment, we've got our community page. So anybody on Facebook, we've got a Facebook organisation page, Birmingham UFO Group, you can search for. I don't really put that much on there, just announce when there's new case reports and new meeting events. But we've got our community page, which is called BUFOG Truth Seekers, and people can go on there. I'm the admin of that, so I need to add them to the group. But once they're added, they can ask questions in there, post videos and pictures, talk about their own experiences. I'm on there regularly, as is many of the other BUFOG members and a whole load of other people. Including yourself, yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, Dave. It's been, we've spoken quite a lot over recent months, and never really in so much depth.
There's so many aspects to this, I could literally go on for hour on different things.
Yeah,
so I'm more than happy to chat again. Yeah.
We will. We'll get you back on. We'll definitely do a one-off episode for that Droid Witch case, because that fascinates me. I've told so many people about that case. It's a really, really interesting case.
It's pretty wild, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's been absolutely brilliant. So until next time, take care.
Thank you very much, Kieran. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Bye. So I hope you enjoyed that interview there with Dave Hodrien. It was certainly fascinating for me. As I said in the interview, I talked to Dave a lot over the past few months, particularly with organising this conference that we're trying to get going. And I've never really got that in depth on the UFO subject with him. Obviously, very, very knowledgeable. A lot of experience with investigating and contactee cases. And as I say, we'll definitely get him on for that one-off special very, very soon to talk about that one in Droitwich. Just to give you a bit of a hint, a bit of a heads up, it involves video footage of a lady vanishing from her bed. Raw video footage of a lady vanishing from her bed and then reappearing again several minutes later. I've seen the video. It's been validated. It's fascinating. And hopefully Dave can come on sooner rather than later again, and we can really dissect that case and bring it to you guys, because it's a fascinating case indeed. So that brings us to the end of this episode. As always, thank you for listening. Please send this on in this time of lockdown. We're all a bit bored. We're all climbing the walls. I'm sure there's people out there that haven't yet heard of this podcast. Just share it around, send it to your friends and family. Give them something interesting to listen to while they're not allowed out at the time being. And please be careful. Please stay safe. Look after yourselves and your loved ones. And we'll speak soon. Take care.